Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. We cover so many different topics on this podcast. And I do, as you all know by now, ask each and every one of you to email me at the end of every episode. And today's guest did just that. His name is Mark Donnigan from Growth Stage Marketing. And he messaged me saying, I noticed that you don't have too many marketers on the podcast or discussions about MarTech. So I invited him on the podcast to right that wrong straight away, but I don't want to reveal too many spoilers. He is a great guy, someone I could chat with for hours. So instead, let's get him straight on. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Arizona so you can join me and Mark in conversation right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, it's great to be here, Neil. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, so my name's Mark Donnigan. I work with technical founders really to architect marketing playbooks, primarily for B2B focused sales motions. And, I'm a guy that really spans the strategy to the implementation. I love, disruptive innovation startups. And, I really like getting involved at that stage where the product's been built, the solution is ready, and we built it, but no one's coming to our party. And I think a lot of product led, especially startup founders, just naturally sort of fall into that because, you're super excited. You really have an innovation that's going to meet a market need. And it's easy to assume, because we built it, they're going to come. And that's just unfortunately not the way it works. So, I really, get involved. And, as I said, I work, initially in developing the strategies, and then very often, roll up my sleeves and get to work implementing, whether that's with an existing team or building a team.
And you mentioned there about executing marketing playbooks and designing them, of course. But can you tell me a bit more about how they actually produce real business results for early and growth technology startup companies? Because I suspect it's something that for many people listening, they'll be completely unaware of and how it all fits together.
Yeah, it's a great question because I just made the comment that especially just where I naturally gravitate towards, I'm really a technologist. I started programming when I was 12, and I didn't actually end up finishing my computer science degree. So in terms of professionally, I never went down the engineering route. But the point is, I'm very much drawn to technology and innovation. So, what I find is that founders and startup teams building very, technology forward-leaning companies, a lot of times haven't had a lot of exposure in their careers to marketing. And so, the perception is marketing is the pretty pictures and the videos and the social media stuff, in the trade show booth. And so, hey, we need to find a marketing person who can do all that, all that pretty stuff. The fact of the matter is that, those are important components and there's certainly pieces that need to be executed. But that is not marketing. That's sort of the outward window dressing, so to speak. Really, marketing is at the core go-to market. It's integrated with the sales process in a lot of startups today. And so when we talk about marketing, sometimes it can get a little confusing if someone's not really living in that world because, they're approaching it from the, what trade show we're going to go to to what's our booth going to look like? How are we doing on social media? Kind of that typical stuff, as I just said. But the reality is that where we have to start is saying, what is the go-to-market plan? What's the framework? What's the strategy that's going to allow us ultimately to make a sale? Because at the end of the day, we can make the company famous. Everybody can know our brand and know the name of the company. But if they're not giving us POs, and I work primarily in B2B, so for B2B, it's a PO that's a purchase order that is really the mechanism that says, hey, there's some revenue coming here. If we're not getting POs, then, unfortunately, we're going to fail. So this is about a market and positioning, as well as a sales. Sometimes it's a strategy. How are we actually going to sell our product? What's the mechanism? And how do those two pieces fit together, the sales and the marketing? So there are some very clear steps to follow. There is definitely the science side of it, and there's the art as well.
And you mentioned now that you're a technologist at heart. Presumably that would come in really handy in the world of MarTech, because technology has engulfed that world, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And, so stepping back, I have found that nowadays there really is not an industry that isn't being interrupted with technology, or digital transformation is everywhere. And of course, 2020 with the pandemic is going to be the year that's forever referred to as the year that all of this digital transformation talk that has been going on for years. I mean, for more than 10 years, really even 15 years. This whole shift from doing a lot of things in kind of a physical manner to virtual, to online. 2020 is the year it happened. But that disruption, so to speak, has carried through every single industry. So even some of the oldest and the industries that maybe no one really thought could be quote unquote digitally disrupted have been. And so when we talk about technology, we're talking obviously, in some cases about the products and the services and what we're actually building. In other words, what we're bringing into the market. But we're talking as well about how, as a marketing organization, how as a sales organization, we're able now to approach a market, talk to a market, speak to a market in a way that previously, it was always available, but often the ecosystem or the market, was maybe less open. So that's really where I'm super excited about what is happening right now in business and in marketing in particular. Now, MarTech, from a technology perspective, all the tools that we have available, this is also, very, very exciting and opens up some tremendous opportunities for really scale. So that a startup, what it allows now any team to do is, I like to say, kind of punch above their weight. So you no longer need to go out and hire the classic, I need 7 to 10 people in marketing just so I can get the job done. Now, with 3 to 5, and with the right tools and the right strategies and the right frameworks, it is very possible to outperform teams that are much, much larger. And that's really, really exciting. And that's great news for startup founders.
So for anyone listening that are outside this world, or maybe just want to take a look under the hood and understand how it all works, what does that go-to-market engineering process actually look like?
Yeah. So, again, when we talk about processes and frameworks, they I really like to start simple, but as is usually the case, almost always the case, the devil's in the details. So I'm going to define, at a very high level, very simple framework that will be sort of a slap on the forehead, of okay, that's kind of obvious, and then we can dip in a little bit deeper if you're interested in going there. But what I find is that rather than starting from sort of like a brand audit perspective. And what I mean by that is often when a consultant or someone comes in to work with a company and maybe they're just getting started or maybe they're struggling a little bit, kind of the default behavior is, hey, let's look at your brand, let's see what your exposure is online. Does the ecosystem know about you? Does the industry know about you? And that's all kind of brand facing. I don't actually believe that's the right approach. I think the first thing is to start by clearly defining the problem that they're solving. So what is the problem that product or that solution, that service, whatever it is that the company has developed, what is the problem that they are uniquely able to solve? So this sounds like kind of, again, a slap on the forehead, like, well, yeah, I mean, that's why the company was created, so, I mean, that's just a given, right? But I am shocked. And, if any of the listeners are out there and you're in an earlier stage startup or you're pre-product market fit and you're going through the process, I would encourage you to try and, just ask yourself, can I clearly define what the problem is? Because what invariably happens is the problem statement is either so broad and so wide that it can't actually possibly hit because it's just too broad, or it is so narrow that it also is going to miss. And so you have to start by solving the problem. Then you have to develop. So the second piece of this framework is developing the key message or messages that explain very simply how we solve that problem. And again, I realize that it's so tempting to sort of be like, okay, this is all very common sense stuff. Like we've already gone through all these exercises. But where I have seen startups that have a real solution that solves a real need, but they're not being successful, 99% of the time, which is to say almost 100% of the time, I can go back and again, either their problem definition is so broad, they're trying to, hit everybody and explain to the entire world why everyone on the planet, all 7 billion people could use their product, or they're just so narrow. And if they get that targeting off, then again, they're missing the target. So this is really, really critical. And then, finally, the third step of this process, this whole, go to market and what we're talking about is the foundation for demand generation, because demand generation is revenue, right? So after you've defined the problem, after you've very clearly developed the key messages that explain, how is your life going to be better after, using our solution, after implementing our product than it was before, you just have to get into the field. So the third step is get into the field and start spreading the message. Now, this is where I'm super excited about what's happening right now in marketing, where the buyers the buying journey has gotten so fragmented that there is just tremendous desire for community. And what I am seeing is the old days of where the trade show and a handful of of pillar vendors, in a particular market, in a particular ecosystem, in a particular industry, hold all the keys to communicating with the customer. That's how it used to be 20 years ago. You had to go to the major trade shows because you had to hear from the largest vendors in your space, because that was how, as a buyer, you would learn. That's how you got the information to make a decision on products and understand where the market's going and what technology trends are, et cetera. Well, all of that has just been decimated, not only as a result of the pandemic and everything going virtual, but it's been happening for years because the internet has leveled the playing field. And so now I can get any information as a buyer that I want or need without ever talking to a vendor. This absolutely flips the marketing game on its head. And so now if I'm a marketer and if I'm not in the field and if I don't have a really good understanding of how my buyer is receiving information and getting information, then I'm just going to be, as we like to say, spraying and praying, just blasting content all over, hoping that maybe if I put it on Facebook and I put it on LinkedIn and I run Google ads and I advertise in half a dozen major industry, blogs and handful of magazines that might still exist. And, and I go to, certain trade shows and I have a booth that I just hope it all works. And that is just not a good place to be sitting here in 2020, staring down 2021.
And of course, another big focus is that need to eradicate information silos and increasing collaboration. So with all that in mind, can you tell me a little bit more about how this 3-standard cord cannot be broken and the importance of having that strong relationship between the CMO, CRO, and the CEO too?
Yeah. So, inside it's a really good point that you bring up there, Neil, because inside the organization now, we're sort of shifting our focus. We're, talking here for a couple minutes, more about earlier stage where a lot of times, the marketing leader is probably also the sales leader, might also be the CEO, so there's a small number of people wearing a number of hats. But as an organization grows and you begin to develop these silos, which, by the way, they should not be silos, but it often is what happens. So you have the revenue silo, all the sellers, the sales team, the head of sales, you have the marketing team and the head of marketing, you have the CEO and the executive team. And, it's so critical. I have always operated, and I've just never found ever an example where by having 3 silos that could all be very strong, very good organizations, but they're not working together, where a company really ultimately succeeds. I see a much better example of where, sort of like a rope, and that's why I like the analogy of the 3 the 3-stranded cord. So you take 3 smaller, strands of rope and you twist those together in the right way. And wow, I mean, you could pull cars with it. It's really, 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 really strong. And so that is a very intentional thing that has to happen culturally inside the company. And ultimately, what I have found is that it's my individual responsibility as a member of one of those 3 strands, so to speak. So generally, I'm sitting in the marketing chair, and so it's not my responsibility to look at my CEO or at the founder of the company and say, hey, you need to bring us together. It's actually my job to be actively participating in that integration process. But with that said, it is super critical that culturally, and again, starting at the top with the CEO, that this be mandated, I guess you could say, but it's modeled. is this behavior. And when you bring especially marketing and sales together, wow, it's magic, because when the sales head and the marketing head understand that we all rise together or we swim together, meaning, we're out of the boat and we're just trying to survive. When they are joined and when they are connected at that level, I've seen just multiple times where great things happen, because, not every quarter is going to be knockout, unfortunately. I mean, it's great when those happen, but, when things are not trending in the right direction, when the numbers are off, when, the go-to-market strategies aren't connecting, that's when the marketing and the sales leader must get together and must work together, or else the company's going to fail.
And before you came on the podcast today, I did read about demand gen being the responsibility of the entire company, but it should always be led by marketing. Is that something you can expand on, and the reasons why?
Yeah. So, nowadays a very, very popular, and for very good reason, business model is SaaS, software as a service. And now there's a new twist on that called PaaS, platform as a service. And so in those business models, there's very often a function called demand generation. And that's because ultimately, even though there is a sales team, and of course, a lot of this depends on, annual value of a deal and the average cash value. And, so if you're selling a product that is maybe on average $5,000 to $7,000 a year, that's a very different sort of sales motion than if it's $70,000 to $300,000 a year, and or something even larger. But the point is that demand generation is often a function inside the marketing team that is about producing leads. I mean, that's the job. The problem that I have with saying that there's a team of people, there's kind of this single function. There's this team of people. We have the demand gen team, and they sit over here in this corner. Is that what it does? Is it relegates the total success of the company on the heads of a handful of people, when in reality, demand generation success spans across marketing. It really starts, and it's led, I believe, in marketing, but it of course connects to sales. It goes to product. It goes all the way into the executive suite across function. It even goes into HR, and it goes into people management. And so I have found that changing the thinking, the mindset. Now you still have the team that's focused on the function, because there's specific things that the demand gen marketers and the demand gen team will be doing. So when they come to work every day, or, they, wake up and start their day, they need to be doing certain things. But the notion that demand gen just starts and stops with this group of 6 or 8 or 10 or 20 or 30 people is really wrong in my view, and from what I have seen.
And I also read that you've got a belief that today's CMO is a business strategist and an ecosystem and domain expert, every bit as much as a marketer. Can you tell me a bit more about that school of thought too?
Yeah, I believe this really with all my heart. So, as marketers, for the marketers in the audience, especially, those who are sitting in a VP of marketing or CMO title, as many will attest to, the marketing chair rotates frequently, which is to say that, unfortunately, business starts to stumble, and usually the first head to get lopped off is the CMO, the head of marketing. Well, let's get someone new in here. Surely they can get the job done. And What I have found, just in observation and in conversation with executive teams, working with clients, is that almost always, I don't know if I can say that I have never run into a situation where maybe someone just really didn't perform in their job, so they just didn't have the skills or whatever. For some reason, they weren't getting the job done. So that does happen. But what I've found is that more often than not, the situation of somebody getting replaced as a head of marketing really had nothing to do with them not being good at their job. In fact, I found the opposite. I found in some cases that it was quite shocking to me because wow, this is a really highly qualified, very skilled, hardworking. In other words, they were doing all of the right things, but they lost their job because unfortunately what they were doing didn't work, so at the end of the day, results are what really matters. Right. Yeah. And so I began to really think a lot about why that is, how is it? And this seems to be a bit of a pattern. So what's going on here? Why is this happening? And what I observed is that generally speaking, those were the marketing leaders who were executing a playbook from 2005, from basically their business school training from, 2000, 2005, 2010. So, 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were executing it in some cases flawlessly, but they weren't in the market. They weren't connecting to the market. They never really understood the nuance, the power lines of how the ecosystem worked. And as a result, they were executing brilliantly, but they were shooting in the opposite direction of the target. To use that analogy. And so, they were lining up the gun sights and everything was spot on. The problem was the target was in the opposite direction and they were, of course, missing it. And so, what I have found is that we are in such a dynamic, time in business. And by the way, there is no quote unquote going back. And I'm speaking beyond even just sort of, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, but that's certainly front and center for all of us right now. But it's not that we're going to kind of return to the good old days of business. The world is just moving too fast. We are in a fully integrated global economy. We have been for years, so that's not really anything new. But the marketing leader who is not deeply entrenched in their industry and in their ecosystem is really, really going to struggle. And so this is what I mean by the fact that, a marketing leader really is a strategist. A marketing leader owns the ecosystem. It's the marketing leader that in the e-staff meetings, when the executive team meets, it's the marketing leader that should have the most recent and on-point feedback of what's happening with competitors, what's happening, just general trends in terms of the market that could be affecting the business or the business strategy. And to the extent that that person has that information and is able to bring that forward, it makes them indispensable. And so all of a sudden, the marketing leader goes from kind of being the first head to lop off to the last head to lop off because wow, the CEO is saying, this is the last person I can get rid of because this is the one person who has the most direct conduit to what is really going on in the in our industry, in the ecosystem.
And as this is a tech podcast, I'm curious, how have you seen more tech transform the industry in your career? You've mentioned a few of the things that you're possibly not so happy with, but is there anything that you've seen that has transformed the industry?
Yeah. So, one of the things that is really great with marketing technology and, marketing automation platforms is obviously, there is an efficiency that comes from being able to, do all kinds of really cool, email marketing and social media posting. And, the platforms are very, very powerful. But the thing that I think is so powerful. I'm a really firm believer in getting rid of gated content to marketing assets. It astounds me to this day to see how, I'll see a brilliant ad, maybe on LinkedIn for a white paper or something where I think, hey, yeah, actually, I'd like to read that, even though most of the time I'm disappointed with what I actually am able to learn. But every once in a while, it's really useful. So I click on it and it forces me to go through, and fill out 18 fields of information. And I think we've all had this experience. And, with all of the new marketing automation platforms and other tools that are available around them, and using pixels and, it's so awesome that now we can track in an appropriate way, still complying with GDPR and, all of the appropriate regulations, but we can serve a better experience to the user. And I think, what I have seen and in my approach working with my clients is I try and think, I try and think almost like an e-commerce site would, like how can I make sure that my content, which is sort of like my product, is always seen, by the right people that I want to see it. And so, MarTech is just amazingly powerful today where there's data enrichment tools that, we can use to build a profile of who a user is, even though a lot of times it's anonymized because, again, we haven't asked for their email address yet, but there's a profile. So that next thing I know, I've gone to a website, I've spent some time on the site, now I'm on Facebook, and guess what? I'm now seeing not an ad for the business, but I'm seeing a white paper ad, or I'm getting pushed information, or there's a blog post, there's something I'm interested in, and maybe I don't click on it the first time, maybe not the second time, but the third or the fourth time, like, yeah, boy, that looks interesting. I click on it. Now I'm driven right back into the website. Now I have a whole nother experience path, and all of this is made possible ultimately with the latest MarTech technology that's being developed, which is now being rolled into, like platforms like HubSpot, or Salesforce, Pardot, Marketo. I mean, it's in all the major platforms. Previously, you had to bring together, 3 or 4 tools and kind of, duct tape and rubber band them together to get all this to work. But, that's really exciting, for me as a marketer.
And speaking of excitement, we're here in 2021. We've got a new year of opportunity. We're all hoping for much better things than last year. But are there any tech trends that you're going to be monitoring closely this year, or anything that particularly interests you?
Yeah, I am very interested to see where virtual, video selling goes again post-pandemic. And maybe it's not as much of a tech trend because, effectively we're talking about Zoom meetings, right? But I think this is a very, very important trend to watch, is just, are buyers going to return to some of the old patterns? In other words, are they going to be as quick to return to in-person events? Frankly, are they going to be as quick to welcome us back into their offices? Yeah. And I'm setting aside any, let's just make the assumption that, there's a vaccine and that, there aren't the health risks. So I'm not talking about that side of it, but just, I think in the last almost a year now, it's hard to believe, good solid 9 months, 10 months, we have seen that not only can we work virtually, but there's a lot of efficiencies. Now, from a buyer perspective, it might be viewed as a good thing, right? To say, hey, I no longer need to spend, 6, 8, 10 hours, of my work week, meeting with vendors and talking to people, in person. And, I can just schedule all this virtually, and it's a little more flexible. It's easier for me to accommodate. But this could have, if this becomes a persistent change by our buyers, and again, I'm talking B2B here, this could have a very profound profound impact in how our sales teams are built. This could have a profound impact in what our ongoing marketing activities and marketing motions look like. And so I'm very, very interested to see, I guess, is there going to be a persistent behavioral change?
And what's next for you? What's your focus going to be this year?
Well, I am really excited. I'm working with a couple clients that we're doing some really exciting things. But one client, our major initiative for 2021 is to build a community. And, this is something that I really believe is in the early days, but I think it's just going to come on super, super strong, where effectively buyers in an ecosystem self-organize. And I mentioned it a few minutes earlier when I said that, 15, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, you kind of had to go to the major trade shows, the major conferences to really learn what was going on. And that's where, you could hear directly from the vendors, you could talk to your peers, you could get a sense. So then you go back to the office and you could say, yeah, I think we're doing the right things, or boy, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about this company or this solution, or, we should go explore that. That's all. There's no need to do that anymore. And what I'm observing is that a lot of buyers, or these same people that used to go to these shows and, stand around the aisles and stand around the, at Starbucks or, the hotel lobby and have a drink at the end of the night. Now they're doing it all virtually. And so we're really excited, and I'm excited about the prospects of actually building communities that are there to ultimately serve the ecosystem, but by serving the ecosystem, just automatically defer value to the organizers, to those who are quote unquote throwing the party. And so this is something that I'm excited to be jumping in earnest, and we have really high hopes that it's going to really be a major driver for our business. Not just in 2021, but moving forward.
It's been incredibly cool chatting with you today. And for anyone listening that would like to dive a little bit deeper into the subject, or maybe even contact a member of your team, what's the best way of finding you online and finding that contact information?
Yeah. So, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn. So just type my name, Mark Donnigan, and you will find me. A quick tip there. I do get a lot of connect requests. And unfortunately it's not always obvious, like who people are. So if you heard me on the show, make sure you just mention it. And of course I'll be happy to accept you. But my website is the best way. And I have, I have a number of blog posts, and I've got some free resources up on it that I think would be really useful. And of course I don't ask for any email address. You don't have to fill out a form. So go to my website at growthstage.marketing, and I'm sure we'll link up to that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll make sure they're all added, and the blog posts that I promote this episode as well. I've loved chatting with you today, especially learning a little bit more about how technology is like this, is helping real business, or helping drive real business results for early and growth stage technology and disruptive innovation startup companies. Incredibly cool what you're doing. I'd love to get you back on next year, see how things are going. But more than anything, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. It was great being on.
I love how Mark produces real business results for those early and growth stage technology and disruptive innovation startup companies. But for me, it's his passion for getting the most value from every marketing dollar invested, and his passion for technology that really shines through. So I cannot thank him enough for taking the time to email me at the end of the episode, and he's come on here and shared his story. And remember, I invite each and every one of you listening, wherever you are in the world, to do the same. You can ask me a question, share your insights, or even come on the podcast. Whatever it is, this platform is your platform too. For some reason, I was about to burst into Whitney Houston's Your Love Is My Love, but I reined myself in. So my New Year's resolutions must be working. But before I run the risk of doing it, I'm going to just say, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. A huge thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. I know it's a big ask. I know that I flood your podcast feed each and every day. And the fact that you don't unsubscribe and you stick around means more to me than you will ever know. So keep those messages coming in. We'll do it all again tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.